Crime and Crime Again is a true crime podcast containing subject matter that may be graphic or disturbing. Listener discretion is advised. Pennsylvania State University, more commonly known as Penn State, hosts 24 campuses across the state of Pennsylvania, the largest of which is Penn State University Park, which sits at the heart of the town of State College, Pennsylvania. At 348 Blue Course Drive, just 8 minutes from Penn State's University Park campus, sits the Elite State College apartment complex, which was once named State College Park Apartments. And just 10 minutes from that apartment complex is a restaurant called The Coop, Korean Chicken and Cuisine, once named Seoul Garden Korean Restaurant. Though each of these locations are entirely separate entities, they do share one thing in common: 21-year-old Cindy Song, who disappeared in the early hours of November 1st, 2001. Cindy was a student at Penn State. She worked 2 jobs, one of which was at the Seoul Garden Korean Restaurant, and she disappeared from apartment 363 at the State College Park apartment complex. Hyunjung Song, known as Cindy to family and friends, was born on February 25, 1980 in Seoul, South Korea, where she spent the first 15 years of her life. In 1995, when Cindy was 15 years old, she made the nearly 7,000-mile journey from Seoul, South Korea to Springfield, Virginia, to live with her aunt and uncle. Cindy was driven and ambitious. She made the momentous decision to move a world away from everything she had ever known at such a young age because she wanted to pursue an exceptional education. Cindy was also adventurous and curious. Even as a young teenager, there was so much of the world, of life, that she wanted to experience. After moving to Virginia, Cindy attended Hayfield Secondary School for 1 year, before transferring to Randolph-Macon Academy in 1996. During high school, she was an athlete, running on the track team as well as playing on the tennis team. She graduated from high school in 1998. After high school, Cindy was accepted to and enrolled at Penn State, about 3 hours away from where she had previously lived with her aunt and uncle in Virginia. Cindy had developed a passion for the arts. She loved film studies and photography, and artists and painters, particularly Van Gogh. Because of this, she majored in integrative arts and had aspirations of becoming a graphic designer. Cindy thrived in college. She was studious and hardworking, maintaining good grades while also keeping up with her vibrant social life. She had joined organizations such as the Korean Undergraduate Student Association, Advertising Club, and the American Red Cross. Cindy also ran an active blog, where she wrote about her love of art, photography, film, music, and more. On top of all of that, she held 2 part-time jobs. Needless to say, Cindy was motivated and had her sights set on absolute success in all areas of her life. It's unclear exactly when, but at some point, Cindy met a fellow student at Penn State named Richard, and they clicked instantly. They started a relationship and soon moved in together into an off-campus apartment. Apartment 363 at the State College Park apartment complex. For reasons unknown, the relationship abruptly ended in September 2001. There is conflicting information about who exactly ended the relationship, but Richard moved out of the apartment after the breakup. According to friends of Cindy, she was heartbroken, and she started struggling with her mental health. But Cindy quickly took charge of it and started going to therapy as well as taking medication. She turned to her blog to express her feelings of heartbreak, discuss her self-love journey, and document her mental health. Soon, Cindy found a new roommate named Yunju, known to friends as Catherine. The 2 women got along well and often made plans together. Overall, Cindy seemed to really be doing the work to keep herself and her life on track after such an emotional blow. She was continuing to maintain her social life, and she was making plans for the future. By late October 2001, Cindy had purchased Britney Spears concert tickets for a show in November. She had also purchased a new computer that was set to be delivered within the first couple weeks of November. Cindy had already registered for her spring semester classes, and she had applied for a graphic design internship that was set to begin in the spring. Despite her recent struggles with her mental health, she was trying to pick up the pieces and move forward. On the night of October 31st, 2001, Halloween festivities were in full swing at Penn State's University Park campus. 21-year-old Cindy had made plans with two of her good friends, Lisa and Stacy, to go out to a Halloween party that night. Cindy dressed up as a bunny that night, wearing a pink top with a bunny design, a white tennis skirt, a fake white bunny tail, and white bunny ears on her head. Cindy and her friends headed out to Players Nightclub at 112 West College Ave for the party. The bar is now known as the Basement Night Spot. The three of them partied at the bar until last call at 2 a.m., at which point they went to an apartment complex nearby to play some video games with a friend. Around 4 a.m. on November 1st, 2001, Stacy drove Cindy back to her apartment complex. The pair reportedly stopped at a nearby Unimart to grab some food before heading to Cindy's apartment. When they arrived at the complex, Cindy said goodbye to her friend, and Stacy recalled seeing Cindy climbing the stairs up to her apartment before she drove off. That was the last time anyone ever saw Cindy Song. Cindy's roommate Catherine had been visiting with family in Philadelphia for an extended period of time, so in the weeks before the Halloween party, Cindy had been in the apartment alone. On the afternoon of November 1st, 2001, Catherine returned home from her trip to Philadelphia to find their apartment locked from the outside and empty when she entered. Initially, she didn't think much of this. She and Cindy had kept in communication while she was away, and they even had plans to go out the following night. November 1st, 2001 was a Thursday, so although we don't know Cindy's precise schedule, it's likely that she had classes that day as well as the following day. But Cindy didn't show up to any of her classes on November 1st or 2nd. Her friends hadn't heard from her and weren't getting any responses from her. At that point, roommate Catherine was growing concerned. When Cindy's friends did a little more digging, they learned that she also hadn't shown up to work at either of her part-time jobs. On Saturday, November 3rd, 2001, when Cindy's friends still could not locate or contact her, they decided to get the police involved. Because it was a weekend, the report was given to patrol officers. It wasn't until Monday, November 5th, 2001, that Cindy's missing person report landed on the desk of a detective. At that point, Cindy had been missing for 4 days. 4 days worth of potential witnesses that now might not recall whether they saw anything of importance. 4 days of potential evidence that now might be covered up or disposed of entirely. The same day that a detective was assigned to Cindy's disappearance, November 5th, detectives visited Cindy's apartment to search for any indication as to what happened or where she could have gone. In the apartment, investigators found Cindy's backpack somewhat wedged under her bed. Inside of her backpack was her cell phone. Friends confirmed that if Cindy planned to be gone for a period of time, she would most certainly have taken her cell phone with her. Investigators also found fake eyelashes on the bathroom sink. Reports state that those fake eyelashes were the ones that Cindy wore the night of the Halloween party, which would indicate that she did make it back inside of her apartment that night, long enough to take the eyelashes off before leaving again. Presumably, both Cindy's roommate Catherine and her other friends would have confirmed that those eyelashes did in fact belong to Cindy, and that she had been wearing them on the night of the Halloween party. Missing from the apartment were Cindy's purse, wallet, ID, and keys. And again, the apartment was locked from the outside when Catherine returned home, so Cindy presumably left the apartment of her own volition and locked the door behind her. No part of Cindy's costume from the Halloween party was found inside the apartment. She didn't bother changing clothes before she left, another indication that she fully intended to return home quickly. There was no sign of any struggle in the apartment, nor any sign of a break-in or robbery. It appeared that Cindy had left her apartment for a quick trip, and while she was out, she had stumbled into danger. Despite this being the only plausible theory, investigators were stumped about why Cindy might have left her apartment that night. She had just spent several hours out with friends, had reportedly stopped for food on her way home, and it was after 4 a.m. when she arrived home. What could she possibly have needed so urgently at such an hour? The only theory that investigators could come up with was that Cindy had made a 4 a.m. trip to the giant grocery store across from her apartment complex, which was open 24 hours a day. But when investigators reviewed surveillance footage from the grocery store, they found no evidence that Cindy had been there, and there were no purchases made at that store with Cindy's debit card. Cindy had probably never entered that grocery store, but that didn't mean that it wasn't her destination. Was it possible that Cindy was on her way to the grocery store but never made it because she crossed paths with someone who did her harm? Without any other clues or theories to go on, investigators began searching. Tracking dogs were brought in to investigate wooded areas near Cindy's apartment complex, but no trace of Cindy was found. On December 5, 2001, just over a month after Cindy disappeared, investigators received their first promising tip. A witness claimed to have seen a woman matching Cindy's description being forced into a car by an olive-skinned man in Philadelphia's Chinatown, more than 3 hours away from State College where Cindy was last seen. According to the witness, the woman was shouting for help. Ultimately, however, and for unspecified reasons, investigators determined that the woman described in the tip was not Cindy Song. Cindy's mother, Ban Soon Song, and Cindy's brother, Ki-ho Song, flew from Seoul, South Korea to State College, Pennsylvania shortly after Cindy disappeared, and they were frustrated with police from the moment they arrived. It appeared that Cindy's case was going cold within just weeks of her disappearance. It didn't help that police didn't start their investigation until 4 days after she was last seen, due to the delay in her being reported missing. Within weeks of Cindy's disappearance, students at Penn State had formed a group called the Coalition to Find Cindy Song. At its peak, the group consisted of about 30 members. Their primary goal was to put pressure on both the university and police to allocate more resources and, well, effort to the investigation into Cindy's disappearance. The group became a strong support system for Cindy's mother and brother while they were in Pennsylvania searching for Cindy. Months passed and still absolutely nothing related to Cindy was found. Not her keys, not her Halloween costume, and not a shred of forensic evidence anywhere. Cindy's mother, Ban Soon, continued posting missing person flyers around the town, carrying with her the growing heartache at not knowing where her daughter was. In early 2002, Ban Soon, along with attorney and Song family spokesperson, Jin Han, and members of the Coalition to Find Cindy Song, held a press conference where they expressed their frustrations with the investigation and their anger that the case had already gone cold just months after Cindy's disappearance. In the months that followed Cindy's disappearance, vigils were held in her honor, her mother Ban Soon always among the attendees, a lit candle in one hand and her daughter's missing poster in the other. By late summer 2002, almost 1 year after Cindy disappeared, investigators had gathered no new information and were still very much at square one. So, desperate to make progress in the case, they contacted a local psychic who worked with Penn State, hoping to gain some sort of insight. But the psychic's reading offered no new or helpful information. It wasn't until the middle of 2003 that investigators received a massive break in the case that set their sights on a brand new theory. A theory that involved a serial killer who had gone completely undetected by law enforcement. In March 2003, police in Ferguson Township, Pennsylvania were asked to look into a robbery in the area, in which 2 masked men entered a woman's home, pushed her to the ground, and stole some of her belongings. The woman already had 3 suspects in mind when she spoke to police: Paul Weekly, Patrick Russin, and Hugo Selensky. It was no easy task getting Hugo Selensky, who police believed to be the ringleader, to sit down for an interview. But finally, in May 2003, Selensky agreed to speak with police and told them he did know the robbery victim, but that he had nothing to do with the robbery. Police attempted to speak with Patrick Russin, but he repeatedly declined interviews and evaded their efforts. That left Paul Weekly. Weekly was what you might call a career criminal, with a laundry list of robbery charges, for which he served time in federal prison. It was in prison that Weekly met Hugo Selensky. After Weekly was released from prison in March 2002, he and Selensky caught up with one another, and just weeks later, Selensky told Weekly of a plan he was concocting to rob an associate of his named Michael Kurkowski. Kurkowski was a 37-year-old pharmacist who, in 2002, had pleaded guilty to running a prescription drug ring and was preparing to be sentenced for the crimes. Selensky knew that Kurkowski had profited a substantial amount of money from the prescription drug ring, and that he kept much of it in his home. On the day of the planned robbery, Selinski and Weekly showed up to Michael Krakowski's house and found that Krakowski's 37-year-old girlfriend, Tammy Fassett, was also, unfortunately, there. Selinski and Weekly proceeded to beat both Krakowski and his girlfriend, attempting to get Krakowski to reveal the locations where he hid cash in his home. They then strangled the couple. Krakowski and Fassett were later reported missing in May 2002. Fast forward to June 2003, when police in Kingston Township, Pennsylvania were questioning Paul Weekly after failing to make any progress with Hugo Selinski. Weekly revealed to police that his associate, Hugo Selinski, had multiple bodies buried in the backyard of his home in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. This turned out to be true. On Selinski's property, police found the bodies of Michael Krakowski and Tammy Fassett, along with the bodies of 2 local drug dealers. A 5th set of remains was also discovered, but those remains have never been identified. On top of all of that, Weekly claimed that Selinski was also responsible for the 2001 abduction and murder of Penn State student Cindy Song. Weekly claimed that Selinski, with the apparent help of Michael Krakowski, thought that Cindy was a sex worker because of her costume, and had proceeded to abduct and later murder her. Weekly claimed that Krakowski had kept Cindy's bunny ears from her Halloween costume as a trophy, and that he and Selinski had put her body in a gun safe. However, the unidentified set of remains on Selinski's property was determined not to be those of Cindy Song. There was no evidence that Cindy had ever been on Selinski's property, and the bunny ears from her Halloween costume were never found. Selinski's property is 2.5 hours away from the Penn State campus where Cindy was last seen, and there has never been any evidence that Selinski was in the area on the night of Cindy's disappearance. Ultimately, police have never been able to definitively link Hugo Selinski or Paul Weekly to Cindy Song's disappearance. More than 2 decades have now passed since Cindy Song disappeared. After months of hoping and searching, her family returned to South Korea without any answers and without Cindy. No trace of her has ever been found, not even a single piece of the Halloween costume that she was wearing when she disappeared. Cindy Song was 21 years old when she disappeared from her apartment at 348 Blue Course Drive in State College, Pennsylvania, in the very early hours of November 1st, 2001. She was last seen wearing a pink shirt with a bunny design on the front, a white tennis skirt, brown knee-high boots, and a pair of white bunny ears. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Cindy Song, please contact Ferguson Township Police at 814-237-1172. All sources for this episode can be found in the show notes. You can find Crime and Crime Again on X at CrimeAgainPod, on Instagram at CrimeAgainPodcast, and on TikTok at CrimeAgainPodcast. Be sure to check out the YouTube channel, which will also be linked in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode of Crime and Crime Again.